A young nurse bathed a millionaire in a coma, but when he suddenly woke up, something miraculous. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Anna Monroe had been a nurse at Westbridge Private Hospital for almost 2 years, but nothing had ever felt as unsettling as the moment she walked into the neurology department that fateful afternoon. The sterile white halls and the soft hum of fluorescent lights couldn't mask the unease that settled in her chest. The head of neurology, Dr. Harris, had summoned her to his office with an urgent request, and Anna had no idea what to expect. She had always been dedicated to her work, but today, something felt different. As she knocked on the polished mahogany door and stepped inside, she was greeted by Dr. Harris, who was standing by the window, looking out over the city skyline. His usually sharp, confident demeanor seemed clouded by something heavier than usual. "Anna," he said, his voice measured, serious. "We have a patient who requires special care, but this job is not for the weak-hearted." Anna frowned, unsure of what he meant. "Not for the weak-hearted? What kind of patient?" she asked cautiously. Dr. Harris turned to face her, his eyes locking with hers for a moment before he gestured to a thick medical file on his desk. "Grant Carter," he said, his tone somber. Anna's breath caught in her throat. Grant Carter. The name echoed in her mind as she stared at the file, recognizing the black and white newspaper clipping taped to the front. The headline screamed of a horrific car accident. A young billionaire CEO, only 32 years old, had crashed his sports car off a bridge a year ago. The accident had left him in a coma ever since, and the press had followed the case like vultures, speculating about his wealth, his power, and the circumstances surrounding his life and death. But now, Grant Carter was nothing more than a ghost, his once vibrant empire reduced to nothing more than an empty shell, and Anna was being asked to care for him. "You want me to take care of him?" Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Harris nodded. "He needs someone dedicated. Someone who will actually care, someone who will stay with him, talk to him, treat him as more than just another body on a hospital bed." Anna swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle on her shoulders. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Caring for a man who might never wake up, a man whose wealth and influence had once shaped the lives of so many, was daunting. But deep down, Anna knew she had to take the job. "I'll do it," she said quietly. Dr. Harris looked at her, a glint of approval in his eyes. "Good. Your shift starts tonight." As she left his office, Anna's mind was racing. She had no idea what she was about to walk into, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this would be a turning point in her life, one that would change her forever. Anna stood outside Grant Carter's private suite, her heart pounding. The weight of the task ahead settled heavily on her shoulders. It was her first shift taking care of a man whose name had once been synonymous with power and wealth. She had spent the last 2 years in the quiet halls of Westbridge Private Hospital, but this assignment, taking care of the comatose billionaire, felt like a different world altogether. She could hear the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above her, but it did little to ease the tightness in her chest. The door in front of her loomed large. Taking a deep breath, she pushed it open. The room was dim, a stark contrast to the brightness of the hospital hallway. It was furnished luxuriously, with dark oak furniture, plush armchairs, and a king-sized bed draped in crisp white sheets. But the space was empty in more ways than one. Grant Carter lay motionless in the center of it all. His face was pale, his dark hair messy against the pillow. Tubes and wires connected to his body, monitoring every heartbeat, every breath. He looked so fragile, yet Anna knew he had once been a man who controlled entire industries with a single word. She swallowed hard and stepped closer to the bed, her footsteps echoing in the quiet room. She carefully adjusted the 4-drip that was keeping him alive and glanced at the heart monitor. The rhythmic beeping was the only sound that filled the silence, a constant reminder of the man lying before her. "Well, here we are," she whispered under her breath, almost to herself. "This is it." She gently reached for the warm cloth she had prepared and began wiping his face. The coolness of his skin was startling, and her hand lingered on his forehead for a moment longer than necessary. It felt like an odd kind of connection, though she knew he couldn't feel it. Not yet, at least. As she continued her work, she spoke to him softly, more for her own sake than anything else. "I guess you don't get a say in this, huh?" she murmured, trying to break the silence. "I'm sure you would have preferred a different nurse. But here I am." She hesitated for a moment, wiping his chest with the cloth. "I don't even know why I'm talking to you. Maybe it's because I talk to myself sometimes, and it just feels better with someone else here." The heart monitor continued its steady beep, a soft reminder that she wasn't completely alone in the room. The quietness of the space was almost suffocating, and Anna felt the weight of the responsibility settle more heavily on her. But she didn't back away. She couldn't. She had made a promise to herself after her mother passed away. She wouldn't let anyone else be left to face death alone, not if she could help it. Her mother had been just another patient in a sterile hospital room, and Anna had held her hand through the long days of illness. She had promised her mother that she would never let anyone die in solitude. Now, as she stood beside Grant Carter's bed, she knew she was keeping that promise. She just had no idea how much this patient would change her life. The days blended together as Anna carried out her new routine. Every morning and evening, she would bathe Grant, monitor his vitals, and talk to him. At first, it felt like a one-sided conversation, a desperate attempt to fill the emptiness of the room with her voice. "You should see the cafeteria food here, Grant," she laughed softly one morning as she wiped his face. "Even for a billionaire, it's pretty terrible. I doubt you'd survive it." She paused, waiting for a reaction that never came. "It's sad, really. But you're not here for food, are you?" she sighed. She knew he couldn't hear her, couldn't respond, but something about talking to him made her feel less alone in the sterile room. For the first few days, there were no signs of improvement. Grant remained still, his body unmoving, a shell of the man he used to be. The monitor beeped steadily, but Anna could tell that there was something missing. The man who had once been a titan of industry seemed so distant now. Yet, as the days passed, Anna found herself holding onto a small flicker of hope. She continued with her routine, watching him closely for any sign of change. There were moments when she thought she saw something, a slight twitch of his finger or a faint movement in his chest. But each time, it was nothing more than a trick of the light, or so she thought. It wasn't until the fourth night that something truly miraculous happened. Anna was finishing up her shift when, as she leaned over Grant to adjust his pillow, she felt a slight pressure on her wrist. Her heart skipped a beat as she looked down at his hand. His fingers were moving. Not much, but enough for Anna to freeze in place. She held her breath. Could it be? She watched, waiting for confirmation. Slowly, inch by inch, his hand shifted, and Anna's pulse quickened. "Grant," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The monitor beeped slightly faster, the rhythm changing. Anna's eyes widened. This wasn't a hallucination. This was real. "You're awake," she breathed, hardly daring to believe it. The room was still. The only sound was the steady beep of the heart monitor, now slightly quicker. For the first time in weeks, Anna allowed herself a hopeful smile. Perhaps, just perhaps, this man, this billionaire who had been written off as lost, was coming back to life. And as the night stretched on, Anna stayed by his side, holding his hand, waiting for the next sign of life to come. The miracle had just begun. As the days went by, Anna's routine with Grant Carter became more than just a series of medical tasks. It began to feel personal. Each day, she could feel the small shifts in his condition, the subtle changes that seemed to reflect something more than just his body healing. She found herself talking to him more, telling him about the world outside the sterile walls of his private suite. The days blurred into one another, with no real sign of improvement, but still, Anna continued. She had made a promise to herself, and to her mother, that she would never give up on someone who needed help, no matter how impossible the situation seemed. It was during one of these long, quiet nights that something unexpected happened. Anna had finished her shift and was about to leave for the night when she noticed a slight movement on the monitor. At first, it was nothing more than a flicker, but the beep of the heart monitor quickened. She froze. She leaned in closer, her breath caught in her throat. Grant's hand twitched. Not much, but enough for Anna to feel her heart leap. "Grant," she whispered, her voice soft and full of hope. Slowly, as if fighting against the weight of his comatose state, Grant's eyes fluttered. They barely opened, but it was enough to send Anna's heart racing. She didn't dare move, unsure if what she was seeing was real. But when his fingers curled slightly around her hand, she knew. This was it. The man who had been trapped in his own body for so long, unable to respond, was waking up. Anna's hands shook slightly as she called for the doctor, her voice trembling with excitement. She couldn't believe it. Grant Carter was finally coming back to life. The room was a blur of activity as the medical staff rushed in, checking his vitals and ensuring everything was in order. Anna stepped back, letting the doctors take over, but she couldn't stop the smile spreading across her face. She had witnessed something miraculous. It wasn't just the medical machines that had brought Grant back. There was something more, something she couldn't explain. Maybe it was the endless conversations she had shared with him, the way she had treated him not just as a patient, but as a person. Or maybe it was just fate. But whatever it was, Grant Carter was awake. Over the next few days, the miracle that had begun to unfold in the sterile room continued. Grant's recovery was slow, but steady. He started to regain his strength, and with each passing day, he became more aware of his surroundings. At first, his speech was slurred, and his memory was foggy. He couldn't remember much of anything, his family, his company, even his own past. But Anna was there, helping him piece together the fragments of his life, one conversation at a time. During these early moments of his awakening, Anna learned more about Grant than she ever could have imagined. Despite his wealth and success, there was a vulnerability about him that surprised her. He was a man who had been driven by ambition and power, but now, faced with the uncertainty of his own future, he was unsure of who he really was. "I don't remember much," Grant admitted one morning, his voice still weak. "I know who I was. I know what I did. But I don't know who I am now." Anna smiled gently, trying to reassure him. "You're still you, Grant. You may not remember everything, but that doesn't change who you are." He looked at her, his dark eyes filled with confusion and a touch of fear. "And who am I?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Anna hesitated, unsure of how to answer. How could she explain to him that he was not just a billionaire CEO, but a person who was more than his wealth? "You're someone who deserves to be happy," she said softly. "You've been through a lot, but you're still here. And that means something." Grant closed his eyes, taking in her words. For a moment, there was a silence between them, a quiet understanding that passed between them. He was still the man who had once built an empire, but now, he was someone who needed to rebuild himself, emotionally, mentally, and physically. Over the next few days, Anna spent more time with Grant, helping him with his physical therapy, encouraging him to regain his strength. It was slow progress, but there were moments of triumph, small victories that felt like miracles in themselves. With each step forward, Anna couldn't help but feel a growing connection to him. She had started this journey as his nurse, someone who was simply doing her job. But now, she found herself caring for him in ways she hadn't expected. As Grant's memory started to return, so did his family, his estranged brother Nathan, and other relatives, who had stayed away for months. Nathan, however, was not pleased with the progress his brother was making. He was cold, distant, and suspicious of Anna's involvement. He didn't understand why she had been the one to stay by Grant's side, why she seemed to care so much. Anna could sense the tension whenever Nathan was around. There was a deep distrust in his eyes, and it made her uneasy. But she knew her role. She was here to care for Grant, not to get involved in family drama. Still, as the days passed, the lines between professional and personal began to blur. One evening, as she sat by Grant's bed, watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks, she couldn't deny the feelings that were starting to stir within her. She had always been dedicated to her patients, but Grant was different. He wasn't just another case. He was a person, someone who had come back from the brink of death, and someone who had become a part of her life in a way she couldn't explain. Anna couldn't help but wonder what the future held for the two of them. Would they go back to being strangers, or was this the beginning of something more? For now, all she could do was take it one day at a time, and hope that the miracle they had both witnessed was only the beginning. Days passed and Grant's recovery continued to progress slowly but surely. Anna stayed by his side, helping him with his physical therapy, making sure he was eating, and assisting him with basic tasks that had once been second nature to him. Grant's memory, however, remained a jigsaw puzzle with many missing pieces. He would remember fragments of his past, but much of it was unclear, like looking at a photograph where half of the image was obscured. He often asked Anna about his family, but she had to admit she didn't know much about them. His brother Nathan had been around occasionally, but always with a cold and distant demeanor. The contrast between the two brothers was striking. While Grant, though still recovering, had begun to show signs of warmth and vulnerability, Nathan seemed intent on maintaining his icy, businesslike attitude. Anna didn't know what to make of it. But as much as Nathan's presence made her uncomfortable, it was clear that Grant's family, particularly Nathan, was a complicated subject. During one of the quieter days when the hospital was less bustling than usual, Anna found herself sitting at Grant's bedside, reading to him from a book she had brought from home. It was a collection of poems, light and soothing, the kind of thing she used to read when she was stressed. She thought it might help bring him comfort. She paused when she noticed Grant was staring at her intently. "You always read to me," he said, his voice still hoarse but clearer than before. "Why?" Anna smiled gently, closing the book and setting it aside. "I guess I just thought it would help. And I guess I needed to talk. It's easy to feel alone in a place like this." Grant's gaze softened. "I don't remember much, but I remember you being here. I don't know why, but I know you've been by my side the whole time." There was something in his voice, something that made Anna's heart skip. She had heard patients say similar things before, but hearing it from Grant, a man of such stature and power, somehow made it feel different. Anna looked down, not sure how to respond. She had never been the type to get attached to her patients, but something about Grant had changed that. "I promised my mother I would never let anyone be alone in a hospital," Anna said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I guess I didn't want to break that promise, especially not for someone like you." Grant was quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. Then, finally, he said, "Thank you." The two sat in silence for a while, the weight of his gratitude hanging in the air. It wasn't until later that evening, as Anna prepared to leave for the night, that things took an unexpected turn. She was about to walk out of the door when Nathan appeared in the doorway, his arms crossed, a look of barely concealed disapproval on his face. "How's my brother?" he asked, his tone cold. Anna met his gaze, trying to keep her emotions in check. "He's doing better. He's awake, his memory is improving. But it's going to take time." Nathan nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good. He'll need all the time he can get." He stepped into the room, brushing past Anna without a word. Anna hesitated for a moment, then followed him inside. "Is there something I can help you with, Mr. Carter?" Nathan turned to face her, his eyes narrowed. "I don't trust you," he said bluntly. Anna's heart sank. She had expected something like this, but hearing it out loud still stung. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Anna said, her voice steady. "I'm just here to do my job." Nathan scoffed. "Your job? Your job is to make sure my brother stays alive. I don't care about your personal feelings or whatever connection you think you have with him. This is business, and I need to know where your loyalties lie." Anna took a deep breath, trying to keep her cool. "My loyalties are to Grant. And to my patients. I don't need to explain myself to you, Mr. Carter." Nathan glared at her for a moment, his jaw clenched tight. "You think you can play the hero here? You think you can fix him?" His voice was laced with scorn. "This is bigger than you, nurse. You're just a small part of the picture." Anna swallowed hard, the words cutting through her like a knife. But she refused to back down. "I'm doing the best I can, and that's all I can do. If you don't like it, you're free to take it up with the doctors or anyone else in charge. But Grant deserves to be treated with respect, not like a business deal." Nathan stared at her for a moment longer before muttering, "We'll see about that." With that, he turned on his heel and left the room. Anna stood there for a moment, her heart still racing, before she finally let out a deep breath. The tension in the room had been suffocating, and she couldn't shake the feeling that Nathan's coldness toward her was just the beginning of something bigger. As she walked out of the room and made her way to the elevator, she tried to push the encounter out of her mind. But it lingered, gnawing at her, like a shadow she couldn't escape. The next few days were a blur. Grant's recovery was steady, but slow. He regained some of his strength, though his memory was still fragmented. He would remember things for a moment, then forget them again. The doctors remained hopeful, but they all cautioned that his full recovery would take time. Anna spent more time with him, helping him through his therapy sessions, encouraging him to keep going. She could feel the growing bond between them, but she knew it was complicated. She was his nurse, and he was her patient. That was the line that kept them apart. But she couldn't help the way her heart fluttered when he smiled at her, the way his touch lingered just a moment longer than necessary. She knew she couldn't act on it. She couldn't let her emotions get in the way of her job. But the feelings were there, growing stronger with each passing day. And Anna knew, deep down, that she couldn't ignore them forever. Days passed, and Grant's recovery was progressing in ways Anna had not expected. His memory remained patchy, but there were moments when fragments of his past would come flooding back to him. These brief flashes would be enough to shake him to his core, leaving him confused and unsure of who he was, or what he had become. But through it all, Anna remained by his side, a steady presence in his life. As Grant's physical strength grew, so did his emotional vulnerability. The more he remembered, the more he seemed to question his own worth, his place in the world. Despite his empire, despite the wealth and power he had once wielded, there was something deeply uncertain about him now. And in those moments of doubt, Anna would sit with him, listening as he voiced his concerns, offering her gentle words of encouragement. She found herself caring for him in ways she hadn't anticipated, and it was a feeling that confused her. She had always maintained professional boundaries with her patients, but Grant was different. His vulnerability, his confusion, stirred something inside her, something she hadn't expected. There were times when their conversations would drift into silence, the tension between them palpable. She could see it in his eyes, a longing for something more than just physical recovery. He was searching for emotional healing, a way to reconcile with himself and with the world that had once been so familiar. On one particular evening, after a long day of physical therapy, Grant sat up in his bed, looking out the window at the city skyline. The lights twinkled in the distance, a stark contrast to the darkness that still lingered in his mind. "Anna," he said quietly, his voice low, "do you ever wonder if we're just lost? That we're always searching for something, but we don't know what it is?" Anna felt a lump form in her throat. She had heard those words before, from people who had lost their way. But hearing them from Grant, someone who had once controlled everything, made them hit differently. She sat down beside him, careful not to invade his personal space. "I think everyone feels like that sometimes," she said softly. "We all have moments when we question where we're going, or if we're even heading in the right direction." Grant glanced at her, his eyes filled with a quiet sadness. "But I've lost so much. I don't even know who I am anymore." Anna reached out, her hand brushing his. "You're still you, Grant. You may not remember everything, but you're still here, and that matters." He looked at her for a long moment, as if searching for something in her eyes. There was a vulnerability there that she hadn't seen before, a rawness that made her heart ache. He slowly nodded, his gaze falling to the floor. "I don't know how to move forward," he admitted. "I don't know how to fix all the things I've broken." Anna squeezed his hand gently. "You don't have to fix everything at once. Healing takes time, and sometimes it starts with small steps. You're not alone in this, Grant." For the first time since his accident, Anna saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. It was faint, but it was there. And that gave her hope too. She had seen so many people come and go through these hospital halls, some of them recovering, others fading away. But Grant's journey felt different. It wasn't just about his physical recovery. It was about finding himself again, piece by piece. The next day, things took a turn when Nathan arrived at the hospital. His cold demeanor hadn't changed, and Anna could tell he wasn't pleased with the progress Grant had made. He had been distant from his brother ever since the accident, and Anna suspected there was more to his behavior than he was letting on. Nathan had always been the more pragmatic one, focused on business and results, but Anna couldn't shake the feeling that his presence wasn't just about family. There was something deeper at play, something that made her uneasy. She had tried to keep her distance from Nathan, but he had a way of making everything feel like a power struggle. He walked into Grant's room without knocking, his eyes immediately scanning the room as though he were inspecting a piece of property. "How's he doing?" Nathan asked Anna, his tone clipped. Anna met his gaze, holding her ground. "He's doing better," she said. "His memory is improving, and he's making progress physically. But it's going to take time." Nathan looked at his brother, who was sitting up in bed, staring out the window. The tension in the room was thick, and Anna could feel it in the air. She knew Nathan wasn't happy with how things were progressing. He had always been the one to manage things, to make the decisions. But this time, it wasn't in his hands. "You should be focusing more on his recovery, not this, whatever this is," Nathan said, his voice laced with disdain. You're just a nurse. What do you really know about fixing people? Anna's heart clenched at his words, but she refused to let him see how much they affected her. I'm doing my job, she replied firmly. And I'm here for Grant, not you. Nathan scoffed. You think you can just play hero, don't you? You're not some fairy tale nurse here to fix him. This is reality. Anna stood her ground, her eyes never leaving Nathan's. I'm doing the best I can, and I'm here to help him, whether you like it or not. The tension in the room grew even more palpable, and Grant's eyes flickered between his brother and Anna. He hadn't spoken much during their exchange, but it was clear he was affected. Nathan turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, muttering something under his breath. Anna stood there for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. She knew Nathan's disapproval was just the beginning, but she wasn't going to let it stop her. She had made a promise to herself and to Grant, and she wasn't going to break it now. As the door closed behind Nathan, Anna turned back to Grant, offering him a small, reassuring smile. Don't worry about him, she said gently. You're making progress, and that's all that matters. Grant gave a small nod, his eyes tired but grateful. For the first time, he looked at her, with a soft, vulnerable expression, as if he were beginning to trust her just a little bit more. And for Anna, that was all she needed. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready to walk it, one step at a time, with Grant by her side. The days that followed were a mix of hope and frustration. Anna continued to care for Grant with unwavering dedication, watching him make progress, albeit slow. His memory was still fragmented, like pieces of a shattered mirror, and it seemed every time one piece clicked into place, another would slip away. But each moment of clarity, no matter how brief, brought a new sense of life to him. He had been through so much, physically, emotionally, but Anna could see glimpses of the man he once was. And she couldn't help but feel a connection growing between them, despite the professional boundaries she tried so hard to maintain. There were days when Grant would ask about his company, his past, and Anna would try to answer, though she had no answers to give. The press coverage had long since died down, but the looming shadow of his former life still hung over him. He would sometimes talk about the board meetings he'd led, the deals he'd made, the people he'd been surrounded by. But then the fog would creep back in, and his memories would slip away as if they had never existed. One afternoon, as Anna sat beside Grant, helping him with a few exercises to rebuild his strength, the silence between them felt heavier than it had in weeks. He was growing stronger physically, but emotionally, he was still adrift. Anna, he said, his voice shaky but filled with quiet urgency. I don't know who I am anymore. I've lost so much. My company, my family, even myself. I don't know if I can ever be the person I was before. Anna could feel the weight of his words. She had seen him struggle before, but something in the rawness of his voice made her heart ache for him. She set aside the paper she had been reading, her focus solely on him. Grant, you don't have to be the person you were before. The past is gone, but that doesn't mean you don't have a future. You're still here. You still have the chance to create a new life, a new version of yourself. And that's something no one can take away from you. He looked at her, his eyes searching, as if trying to find something within her words. But what if I can't? What if I'm too far gone? She shook her head, a gentle smile forming on her lips. You're not too far gone. You just need time. And you need to let yourself heal, not just physically, but emotionally. You're more than your company, more than your wealth. You're a person, Grant. And I'm here to help you rediscover that. For the first time in a long while, he seemed to relax, a small glimmer of hope flashing in his eyes. The tension in his posture eased, and he leaned back against his pillows, a deep breath escaping him. It wasn't much, but it was something. And to Anna, that something meant everything. The days continued to blend together, but Grant's progress was undeniable. He had regained some of his strength, his ability to move and speak more clearly. His memory remained sporadic, but there were moments when he would recall small details, like his favorite foods or the sound of his mother's voice. The more he remembered, the more Anna could see him coming back to life. However, not all was well in the hospital. Nathan, Grant's brother, had been coming around more frequently, and with each visit, Anna could feel the tension rising. Nathan remained cold and distant, and it was clear that he didn't trust Anna. His visits were often brief, his interactions with Grant stiff and uncomfortable. Anna couldn't figure out what it was about her that bothered him so much, but she suspected it was more than just her presence in his brother's life. It wasn't until one particular afternoon that things took a sharp turn. Grant had been making excellent progress, and Anna had just finished a session with him when Nathan walked in, his face set in a stern expression. Anna could feel the unease building in her chest. She had been avoiding confrontations with Nathan, but it seemed like the time had come. "How is he?" Nathan asked, his voice curt. "He's doing well," Anna replied, her voice calm but firm. "He's regaining his strength, and his memory is improving. It's slow, but it's progress." Nathan nodded, though his expression didn't change. "I don't want him getting too comfortable here," he said. "We need him back in the business. His recovery is important, but the company can't wait forever." Anna felt a tight knot form in her stomach. She had heard the tension in his voice before, but now it was becoming more evident. "Grant's recovery is important, Nathan," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And so is his emotional well-being. He's not just some asset to be rushed back into work. He's a person, and he needs time." Nathan's gaze hardened. "You don't understand," he said coldly. "The company needs him. He needs to get back to work. He can't afford to be just a person right now. I'm not saying you don't care for him, but there's more at stake here than your feelings." The words stung more than Anna expected. She had been doing her job, caring for Grant the best way she knew how, but to hear Nathan dismiss her efforts so bluntly felt like a betrayal. "I understand more than you think," she said, her voice a little sharper than before. "I'm here to help him heal, not just physically, but mentally. And if you can't see that, then maybe you don't understand him as well as you think you do." Nathan's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Anna thought he might say something else, something more cutting. But instead, he turned and walked out of the room without another word. Anna stood there, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. She had been bracing herself for something like this, but it still hurt. It wasn't just the harshness of Nathan's words. It was the realization that Grant's family might never accept the kind of healing he needed. She turned back to Grant, who had been quietly watching their exchange. He didn't say anything at first, but his eyes met hers, filled with gratitude and a quiet sadness. "You're right, he said softly. "I do need time, and I need you to help me find that time." Anna smiled at him, though her heart was heavy. "I'll be here, Grant. One step at a time, we'll figure it out together." And for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe that things would get better, that there was still hope, even in the face of everything else. Grant's recovery had reached a turning point. With each passing day, his strength seemed to return, but the emotional healing remained a much more delicate matter. He had become more engaged, more present in his own life. But still, there were moments when the weight of his past would overwhelm him. He would retreat into himself, the fog of confusion returning as quickly as it had left. Anna could see it in his eyes, the brief flicker of fear and uncertainty, but she was patient. She had promised him she would be there for as long as it took, and she meant it. They had been through so much together already. It was hard to believe it had only been a few weeks since he woke up. Some days were easier than others, but there was one thing that had become undeniable. Grant was starting to see her not just as his nurse, but as someone he could trust, someone who had been there when no one else had. One evening, as Anna was about to wrap up her shift, Grant reached out to her, his voice low but clear. "Anna, can we talk?" he asked. She stopped, surprised, but smiled warmly. "Of course, Grant. What's on your mind?" He hesitated for a moment, his gaze drifting to the window. The night outside was quiet, the lights of the city twinkling in the distance. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he began. "About everything. About my life, what happened, and what's next. I don't know where to start." Anna pulled up a chair next to his bed and sat down. "There's no rush. We can talk as long as you need." For a few moments, there was only the sound of the soft hum of the machines around them. Anna let him take his time. She had learned to be patient with him, to let him go at his own pace. Finally, Grant spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent so many years building this empire, this life, and now it feels like it's all gone. I don't even know if I can go back to that life. But then, I think, is that even who I am anymore?" Anna's heart ached for him. She knew what it was like to feel lost, to wonder if the things that defined you were enough to make you happy. "You don't have to be who you were before," she said softly. "Maybe it's time for you to figure out who you want to be now. in this new chapter of your life. Grant looked at her, his eyes searching her face. Do you think that's possible? Can I really start over? Anna smiled gently. Of course it's possible. You've already made so much progress. You've already started. Every day is a new chance to rebuild, to redefine who you are. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Grant looked down at his hands for a moment, his mind clearly racing. I don't know how to do this alone, he said quietly. But I can't keep living in the past, either. I need help. And I don't know if I can trust anyone other than you. His words hit Anna like a wave, and for a moment, she was taken aback. She had always been there for him, but this was different. This was him asking her to be part of something bigger, something more than just the role of his nurse. Grant, she began, her voice soft but steady, you don't have to do this alone. I'm here for you. But you also need to be honest with yourself about what you want. You can't keep holding on to the past and expect to move forward. Grant nodded slowly, his expression serious. I know. I feel like everything I've worked for is slipping away, and I'm not sure I'm ready to let go of it. Anna understood. She had seen people struggle with this before, the battle between holding on to what they knew and embracing the unknown. But she also knew that real healing came from facing the unknown, from being willing to let go. It's okay to let go of the past, Grant, she said gently. You don't have to erase it, but you can let it go. There's so much more waiting for you, if you're willing to look ahead. For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the conversation hanging between them. Grant's eyes were focused, his face unreadable, but there was a shift in his demeanor, a subtle change. He seemed to be absorbing her words, letting them settle in. Finally, he looked at her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I think I'm ready, he said quietly. I think I can do this. Anna's heart lifted at his words. She had known he was strong, but hearing him say it, hearing him believe in himself again, made all the difference. You can do it, she said firmly. And I'll be right here, helping you every step of the way. The next few days were a turning point for Grant. He started to show more initiative in his recovery. He began asking questions about his company, but not in the way he used to. This time, it wasn't about regaining control. It was about understanding who he was without all the external pressures. He spoke more openly with Anna about his fears and his doubts. And while he still had a long road ahead of him, there was something different about him now. He was no longer the man who had defined himself by his wealth and success. He was someone who was starting to understand what it meant to live for himself, to find peace in his own skin. Nathan, however, wasn't happy about the changes. He continued to push Grant to get back to work, to pick up where he had left off. But Grant, for the first time in a long while, was beginning to see that his value wasn't in his empire. It was in who he was as a person, and as the days went on, he began to distance himself from the pressures Nathan tried to place on him. He wasn't ready to return to the world he had left behind, and he wasn't sure if he ever would be. But for now, he had a new focus, one that didn't include being defined by his past. He was becoming the person he wanted to be, and with Anna's support, he was finally ready to take that first step forward. It was a long road ahead, but for the first time, Grant felt like he was walking it with purpose. And with Anna by his side, he knew he wouldn't be walking alone. Grant's recovery had been nothing short of extraordinary, but the real test was yet to come. As he began to regain his strength and sense of self, he faced a new challenge: how to navigate the world he had left behind. The weight of his past was still there, but it was beginning to lose its hold on him. He no longer saw himself solely as the powerful CEO of a multimillion-dollar empire. He was someone searching for purpose, someone rebuilding from the ground up. Anna had been by his side every step of the way, and it was clear that her presence had become more than just that of a nurse. Their connection had grown into something deeper, something unspoken, yet undeniable. Every conversation, every moment spent together, seemed to bring them closer, and as much as they tried to maintain professional boundaries, it became harder and harder to ignore the growing feelings between them. One evening, as Anna was finishing her shift, Grant asked her to stay a little longer. He had been working on some exercises with his physical therapist, but tonight, he seemed different, more focused, more present than he had been in weeks. Anna, he said softly, his voice hesitant. Can we talk? Anna stopped in her tracks, surprised. Of course, she said, walking over to him. She sat down beside him on the bed, her heart suddenly racing. What's on your mind? Grant hesitated, his fingers playing with the edge of the blanket. I've been thinking about everything. About my life, about what's next, and, he paused, taking a deep breath. About you. Anna's heart skipped a beat. She had known this moment was coming. She had felt the shift in their relationship, the unspoken tension that had been building between them. Grant, she started, but he interrupted her. I know we've both been walking a fine line here, he continued, his eyes searching hers. You've been so patient with me, and I don't know how to thank you for that. But I need to ask, do you think there's something more between us? His words hung in the air, and for a moment, Anna didn't know how to respond. She had tried so hard to keep her professional boundaries, to be there for him without crossing a line. But the truth was, she had developed feelings for him, feelings she had tried to push aside. Grant, she began. But he reached out and gently took her hand. Anna, I don't know what the future holds, but I know I don't want to face it alone. I've already lost so much, and I don't want to lose the chance to build something real, something meaningful. With you. Anna felt her heart swell at his words. She had never imagined that her feelings for him would be returned, and yet here they were, standing on the edge of something new. I've been afraid, she admitted quietly. Afraid of crossing that line, afraid of what it would mean. But I can't deny what I'm feeling. Grant squeezed her hand gently. I don't want to rush anything, but I also don't want to wait. Life is short, and we don't know what tomorrow will bring. Anna smiled softly, her heart full. I think we've both learned that lesson the hard way. The room was quiet for a moment as they sat there. The weight of the unspoken between them finally lifted. In that moment, they both realized that this was not just a healing process for Grant. It was a new beginning for both of them. Over the next few days, their relationship deepened. Grant continued to recover, but now, he was no longer just focusing on his physical healing. He was beginning to rebuild his life in a way that aligned with who he truly was, not who he had been. He started reaching out to his old business associates, but this time, it wasn't to regain control. It was to learn how to manage his life on his own terms. His conversations with Anna became more personal, more about the future than the past. They talked about dreams, about what they wanted from life, and what they could build together. It wasn't easy. Grant still had his moments of doubt, moments when the weight of his previous life threatened to pull him under. But with Anna by his side, he felt stronger, more capable of facing whatever came next. One afternoon, as they sat in the hospital's garden, the sun warming their faces, Grant turned to Anna and said, You've shown me something I didn't know I needed, someone who believes in me, even when I don't believe in myself. I can't thank you enough for that. Anna smiled, her heart full. You don't have to thank me, Grant. I'm just doing my job. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She had come to care for him in a way that went beyond her role as his nurse. I'm here for you, she said softly. And I will be, no matter what. Over the next few weeks, Grant made steady progress, both physically and emotionally. He began to spend more time outside the hospital, taking walks and getting back to the things he used to enjoy. The weight of his past still lingered, but he no longer let it define him. He was learning to move forward, one step at a time. And Anna was there with him, every step of the way. But even as they moved forward, the tension with Nathan remained. Nathan had been growing more frustrated with Grant's slow recovery, and he was pressuring him to return to his business responsibilities. But Grant was no longer willing to let his brother dictate his life. He had realized that his worth wasn't tied to his company or his wealth. His worth was in the person he had become and the future he was creating with Anna. One evening, as Grant and Anna sat in his room, Nathan stormed in, his face tight with anger. You've had enough time, Grant, Nathan snapped. It's time to get back to work. Your company is waiting for you. Grant looked at him, his expression calm but firm. I'm not going back, Nathan. Not like this. I'm not going to sacrifice my life for a company that only sees me as a tool. Nathan's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. You've lost everything. Don't throw away the one thing you have left. Grant stood up, his posture strong. The one thing I have left is my life, Nathan. And I'm not going to let you or anyone else take that from me. Anna watched the exchange quietly, her heart swelling with pride for Grant. This was the man he was becoming, someone who was finally standing up for himself. I'm done, Nathan, Grant said, his voice steady. It's time for me to move on. Nathan glared at him for a moment longer before storming out. leaving Grant and Anna standing there in the quiet. Anna smiled at Grant, feeling a sense of peace settle over them. "You did the right thing," she said softly. Grant smiled back, a sense of calm radiating from him. "It feels like it's finally my time to start living again." And with that, they both knew that the road ahead was still uncertain, but they were no longer afraid. They had each other, and together, they were ready to face whatever came next. Grant's decision to step away from the business world was met with mixed reactions, but for the first time, it felt like he was truly in control of his own life. The tension with Nathan had reached its peak, and after their heated exchange, Grant had made it clear he was no longer going to let his brother or anyone else dictate his path. It wasn't an easy decision, and the uncertainty about what the future held still loomed over him, but there was a sense of freedom in it that he hadn't experienced in years. As Grant spent more time focusing on his recovery and adjusting to this new chapter of his life, Anna continued to stand by him. The bond between them deepened every day, and what had started as a professional relationship had evolved into something much more. They talked about everything: his past, his hopes for the future, their dreams, and the new direction they were both taking. But despite their growing connection, there were still moments when Grant's past crept in. Memories of his former life would surface, sometimes in the form of sharp flashes, other times in quiet, unspoken realizations. The man who had once dominated the business world was still there, buried beneath layers of uncertainty and fear. And in those moments, Anna would be there, steady and supportive, reminding him that the man he was now was just as worthy, just as valuable, as the man he had been before. But even as they grew closer, Anna couldn't shake the feeling that there were things Grant hadn't shared with her yet. There were moments when he would retreat into himself, his eyes distant, and Anna knew he was still struggling with the weight of everything he had lost. She wanted to help him, to give him everything he needed, but there was only so much she could do. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of his apartment, overlooking the city, Grant spoke up. His voice was quiet, and there was a vulnerability in it that made Anna's heart ache. "Anna," he began, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About everything. About who I was, and who I am now." Anna stayed silent, her eyes on him, waiting for him to continue. "I've spent so much of my life chasing success, chasing things that I thought would make me happy," he said. "But now, I'm realizing that maybe I never really knew what it meant to be truly happy. I don't know if I ever really knew who I was, outside of my business, outside of the company." Anna could feel the weight of his words, the uncertainty that still clung to him. She reached out, her hand gently resting on his. "Grant, you're more than your company, more than your past. You've always been more." He looked at her then, his eyes searching hers. "But who am I now? Who do I become? I don't know how to move forward, Anna. I'm scared." Anna felt her chest tighten. She had seen him grow so much in the time since his awakening, but the fear was still there, lurking beneath the surface. She squeezed his hand, her voice soft but firm. "You don't have to have all the answers right now, Grant. You're still figuring things out, and that's okay. You don't need to be the person you were before, and you don't have to have everything figured out. What matters is that you're moving forward, one step at a time." He nodded slowly, his expression softening. For a long moment, they sat there in silence, the weight of the conversation hanging between them. The city lights twinkled in the distance, a reminder of how far they had both come. Grant had made progress, both physically and emotionally, but there were still days when the past felt like a heavy burden. And in those moments, Anna knew she would be there for him. She wasn't just his nurse anymore. She was his confidant, his friend, and, though neither of them had spoken the words yet, she could feel that their connection had grown into something deeper. As the days passed, their relationship continued to evolve. Grant began to slowly distance himself from the pressures of his old life, focusing more on his personal healing and the things that brought him joy. He spent more time outside, enjoying the simple pleasures of life, taking walks in the park, reading books, and having long conversations with Anna about everything and nothing. And with each passing day, the man he was becoming felt more like the man he had always wanted to be. Free from the weight of expectation, free from the pressures of the world that had once defined him. But even as things seemed to be falling into place, there was still the matter of his family, particularly Nathan. Despite Grant's newfound sense of independence, Nathan had continued to try and exert control, pushing for Grant to return to the company, to step back into the role he had once played. It was clear that Nathan didn't understand Grant's decision, and the tension between them was palpable. One afternoon, as Grant and Anna sat in the living room, discussing plans for the future, Nathan stormed into the room, his face flushed with anger. "You're making a mistake, Grant," Nathan said, his voice tight with frustration. "The company needs you. You can't just walk away from it all. You're throwing everything away." Grant stood up slowly, his posture calm but resolute. "I'm not throwing anything away, Nathan," he said, his voice steady. "I'm just choosing a different path. One that's not defined by the company or by the expectations you've placed on me. This is my life, and I'm going to live it on my terms." Nathan's eyes flashed with anger. "You can't be serious. You're giving up everything for what? Some sense of freedom? You'll regret this." Grant's expression softened, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Maybe I will, but at least it'll be my decision. I don't want to live a life defined by others anymore." Nathan stared at him for a moment, his jaw clenched tight. Finally, without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving Grant and Anna alone once more. Anna watched him go, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But in that moment, as she looked at Grant, she knew they were both on the right path. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be challenges along the way, but together, they could face whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, Grant was truly living for himself. And Anna, by his side, was ready to take that journey with him. Grant had come a long way, but even with the progress he had made, there were still pieces of his old life that haunted him. The company, the expectations, the weight of being a CEO. These were all things that had defined him for so long, and while he had walked away from it, the shadow of that life still lingered. But now, for the first time in a long time, he was beginning to see the possibility of a life beyond the confines of his past. With Anna by his side, he had begun to forge a new path, one that was built on his own terms, not the demands of others. He had started to think about what he truly wanted, what his dreams were, and how he could begin to rebuild a life that wasn't defined by success or power. But as much as Grant had moved forward, the tension with Nathan hadn't disappeared. His brother had been quiet since their last confrontation, but Grant could feel the storm brewing. Nathan wasn't one to accept change easily, especially when it came to the family business. One day, as Grant was walking through the hospital garden with Anna, enjoying the fresh air and the quiet peace of the afternoon, he saw Nathan's car pull up. His heart sank a little. He had hoped the tension between them would dissipate, but deep down, he knew that wasn't going to happen. Nathan stepped out of the car, his usual cold demeanor on full display. Grant's heart beat faster as he turned to Anna. "Stay close," he said softly. Anna nodded, her hand slipping into his as they walked toward Nathan. "Grant," Nathan said curtly, his eyes scanning the two of them. "I've been thinking." Grant felt a tightness in his chest. He knew what was coming. Nathan wasn't going to let go of the business that easily. "And?" Grant asked, his voice steady but cautious. "And I think you've made a mistake," Nathan replied. "You've been running away from responsibility, running away from everything that made you who you were. You're not the same person anymore, and it's not a good thing." Grant's breath hitched at his brother's words, but he stood his ground. "I'm not the same person, Nathan, and I'm okay with that. I'm not running away from anything. I'm simply choosing a different path." Nathan's jaw clenched. "A path that leads nowhere," he snapped. "You've abandoned everything. The company, the people who relied on you. You think you can just walk away from it all and find happiness? It doesn't work that way." Anna felt the tension rise between the two men, but she stood silently by Grant's side. She could feel his strength, his resolve, even as Nathan's words seemed to try to push him back into the corner. "Nathan," she said softly, "Grant has every right to choose his own path. He's worked hard for years, and now it's his time to decide what he wants for himself." Nathan glared at her, but before he could respond, Grant stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "This is my life, Nathan. I'm choosing to live it for myself. And if you can't accept that, then we'll have to go our separate ways." There was a long silence between the three of them. Nathan's face was tight with anger, but Grant could see the frustration in his eyes. His brother wasn't ready to let go of the old ways, of the life they had built together. But Grant had made his choice, and he wasn't going to back down now. Nathan opened his mouth as if to argue, but Grant raised his hand, silencing him. "I'm done, Nathan," Grant said firmly. "I've made my peace with the past, and I'm moving forward." Nathan stared at him for a moment, his expression unreadable, and then he turned and walked back to his car, muttering something under his breath. Grant stood there, his heart pounding, but a sense of relief washed over him. The weight of the decision was still heavy, but for the first time, he felt free. As the sound of Nathan's car faded into the distance, Anna turned to him, her hand still in his. "You did it," she said softly. "You stood up for yourself." Grant smiled at her, the smile reaching his eyes for the first time in weeks. "It wasn't easy," he admitted, "but it was the right thing to do. I'm done letting him control my life." They stood there for a few moments, the quiet of the garden wrapping around them like a blanket. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over everything. For the first time in a long while, Grant felt like he could breathe. "You're ready for this, Grant," Anna said softly, her voice filled with warmth and encouragement. "You're ready for a new chapter, a new life." Grant looked at her, his heart swelling. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you by my side." Anna smiled, her eyes soft with affection. "And I'll be here, every step of the way." They stood together, the promise of a new beginning between them, as the sun dipped below the horizon, signaling the start of something new. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to walk it together. And for the first time in a long time, Grant felt like he had everything he needed: his strength, his independence, and the woman who had helped him rediscover who he truly was. The days after Nathan's departure felt like a new chapter for Grant. For the first time in months, the weight of his past, of his family's expectations, seemed to lift from his shoulders. He wasn't sure what his future would look like, but he was finally free to shape it the way he wanted. The fear that had plagued him for so long, the fear of losing everything, had slowly started to fade. Now, all that remained was the possibility of something new, something better. And with Anna by his side, that possibility seemed brighter than ever. They had spent the past few weeks adjusting to this new phase of Grant's recovery. He had begun to explore the things he had long neglected: hobbies, old passions, and a sense of freedom he hadn't felt in years. Each day, they would talk about the future, about the life they wanted to build together. It wasn't always easy, and there were still moments of doubt, but they were facing them together. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of Grant's apartment, overlooking the city, he turned to Anna with a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know," he said, his voice calm and reflective, "I never realized how much I had been holding on to, how much I had built my life around the idea of success, of being someone important. It's like I was living for everyone else, but not for me." Anna smiled softly, her gaze steady. "It's not easy to let go of something that's been a part of you for so long. But it's never too late to find a new way of living. You've already started." Grant nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I used to think that success defined me, that the company, the wealth, the recognition, was everything. But now, I realize it was never about that. It was about feeling like I mattered. But I know now that I don't need all that to feel whole." Anna reached out, placing her hand on his. "You've always mattered, Grant. You just had to see it for yourself. The world doesn't define you. You define yourself." There was a long pause as they sat together, the only sound being the gentle hum of the city below them. For the first time in what felt like forever, Grant felt at peace. He had always been so focused on what he had to achieve, on proving himself to others. But now, for the first time, he was able to focus on what he truly wanted. And what he wanted was simple: to live authentically, to embrace who he was, and to build a life with Anna. As they sat there, the world felt still, and Grant realized that he was no longer living for anyone but himself. That realization was both freeing and terrifying. The journey ahead was uncertain, but it was his journey to make. And with Anna by his side, he was ready to take the first step. Over the next few weeks, Grant continued to adjust to his new life. He began to take on small projects, things that sparked his interest and brought him joy. He didn't know where they would lead, but that was okay. For the first time, he wasn't worried about the outcome. He was simply living in the moment, taking each day as it came. Anna, too, had found herself growing in this new phase of their relationship. She had always been a dedicated nurse, but being with Grant, seeing him heal both physically and emotionally, had opened her eyes to a new understanding of herself. She was no longer just a caretaker. She was a partner, someone who was building a future alongside Grant. And as their relationship deepened, Anna realized that she had never felt more alive, more connected to another person. Grant's vulnerability, his willingness to let go of his past and embrace the present, had given her the courage to do the same. She had always kept her guard up, afraid of getting too close to someone. But with Grant, she felt a sense of security that she hadn't known before. She knew their journey together wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, but they would face them as a team. And that was more than she had ever hoped for. One afternoon, as they took a walk in the park, Grant turned to Anna with a smile. "You know," he said, his voice light, "I never thought I'd be walking through a park like this again. I used to be so caught up in everything that I didn't even notice the small things, the trees, the sky, the simple joy of being outside." Anna laughed softly, her hand resting in his. Sometimes, it's the small things that matter most. The things we take for granted. The moments we forget to appreciate. Grant nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "I think I'm starting to understand that now. I've spent so much of my life chasing after something that was always just out of reach. But now, I realize that the things that really matter are right in front of me. And I don't want to miss them anymore." They continued to walk, the afternoon sun casting a warm glow over the park. For the first time in a long time, Grant felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He wasn't defined by his past, his wealth, or his business. He was simply Grant, a man who was learning to live for himself. And as he walked beside Anna, he knew that whatever the future held, he would face it with her by his side. They didn't have all the answers, and they didn't need to. They had each other, and that was enough. The road ahead might be uncertain, but together, they were ready for whatever came next. It was a new beginning, a chance to rewrite the story of their lives. And this time, it was a story they would tell on their own terms. Grant's life had transformed in ways he hadn't thought possible. What had started as a journey of recovery had slowly morphed into something more profound, an awakening not just of his body, but of his heart and mind. He had spent so much of his life focused on the empire he had built, on the success that had defined him. But now, with Anna by his side, he was learning to embrace the life he wanted to create, one that was his to shape without the weight of expectation. He no longer saw himself as just the billionaire CEO. He was simply Grant, someone who was still learning, still growing, and more importantly, still living. One evening, after a particularly long day of reflection, Grant found himself sitting on the balcony of his apartment again, staring out at the city below. The lights of the city stretched out before him, each one a reminder of how far he had come and how much he had left to discover. Anna joined him, settling beside him with a gentle smile. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, her voice soft, as if she knew exactly what was on his mind. Grant chuckled lightly, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. "I'm just thinking about how different everything feels now. How much of my life I've spent chasing after things that I thought were important, only to realize that the things that really matter, those are the things I've been missing all along." Anna nodded, her hand brushing against his. "It's hard, letting go of what we think defines us. But it's the only way to make room for what truly matters." Grant turned his head to look at her, his expression softening. "You've helped me see that. I don't think I could have done it without you. I don't think I ever would have realized how much I was missing out on." Anna smiled, her heart swelling at his words. "You always had it in you, Grant. You just needed to believe it." There was a comfortable silence between them, and for a moment, Grant felt like everything in his life had fallen into place. It wasn't perfect, and there were still uncertainties ahead, but he was no longer burdened by the need to prove himself. He had nothing left to prove to anyone, least of all to himself. He was starting to understand that true peace didn't come from external success. It came from within. "I'm not sure what the future holds," Grant said quietly, his gaze returning to the lights of the city. "But for the first time, I'm not afraid to face it. I'm ready to make choices for me, not for anyone else." Anna's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had been with him through so much, but hearing him say that, hearing him finally acknowledge his own power, filled her with an overwhelming sense of hope. "And I'll be right here, every step of the way," she said, her voice steady and full of certainty. Grant smiled, his eyes full of gratitude. "I know, and that means everything to me." Over the next few weeks, Grant continued to explore his new life with a renewed sense of purpose. He focused on the things that brought him joy, taking up painting again, something he had once loved before his life became consumed by work. He spent more time outside, walking through parks, meeting new people, and experiencing the world in a way he hadn't allowed himself to before. But the real change wasn't in what he did, it was in how he saw himself. He was no longer defined by his wealth, his company, or anyone else's expectations. He was free to be who he truly was, and that freedom brought him a peace he had never known. Anna, too, felt a shift in herself. As much as she had been Grant's caretaker, she had also been on her own journey. She had spent so much of her life focused on others' needs that she had forgotten her own desires. Being with Grant, seeing him heal and grow, reminded her of the importance of self-care and the value of living for herself. Together, they had created something beautiful, not just a partnership, but a shared life of possibility and growth. They continued to explore their connection, and with each passing day, the bond between them strengthened. One afternoon, as they sat in the park, Anna turned to Grant with a smile. "You know," she said, "we've both come a long way, but I feel like we're just getting started." Grant looked at her, his eyes filled with warmth and affection. "I couldn't agree more. There's still so much I want to do, so much I want to experience. And I want to do it with you." Anna smiled, her heart swelling at his words. "We'll take it one step at a time," she said, her voice full of hope. Grant took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Together, right?" Anna's smile deepened. "Always." As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Grant and Anna continued to build a life that was theirs alone, free from the constraints of their pasts. They traveled, explored new places, and found joy in the simple pleasures of life. Things that had once been overshadowed by ambition and the pursuit of success. They were no longer looking for validation from the world around them. They were creating a world of their own. But even as they found their own peace, the lingering shadow of the family business remained. Nathan had not stopped trying to convince Grant to return to the company. But Grant was resolute in his decision. He had let go of the man he had once been, and he wasn't willing to return to a life that no longer fit him. One evening, as Grant and Anna sat together, Nathan called. His tone was different this time, less demanding, more uncertain. "Grant," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "I've been thinking. Maybe I was wrong. I've been pushing you to go back to the company, to take control again. But I can see now that you've found something else, something that matters more." Grant felt a shift in his own heart as he listened. He had never expected Nathan to understand, but hearing the change in his voice was a sign that perhaps, just maybe, his brother was finally seeing things differently. "I'm glad you see that, Nathan," Grant said, his voice steady. "But my path is my own now. I've made my peace with it." There was a long pause on the other end, and for a moment, Grant thought Nathan might say something else, something more hurtful. But then, Nathan's voice came through, softer than before. "I understand. I just want you to be happy." Grant smiled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "Thank you, Nathan." As he hung up the phone, he turned to Anna, who had been quietly listening. "I think he finally gets it," Grant said, his voice filled with a sense of relief. Anna smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I think he does. And now, you can finally be free to live your life the way you want to." Grant nodded, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "Yes, I can." And as they sat together, watching the sun set over the horizon, Grant realized that he had done it. He had found his way back to himself, and in doing so, he had found a future full of endless possibilities. With Anna by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. Together, they had built something beautiful, and this was only the beginning. Grant had finally found his footing. The chaos of his past, the pressure of expectations, the relentless pursuit of success, those things were now behind him. What lay ahead was an uncharted territory, one he was ready to explore with Anna by his side. He had shed the layers of his old life, and the freedom to shape his future was both exhilarating and daunting. The past few months had been transformative. He had found peace in the choices he made, but there were still moments when the weight of everything he'd left behind would catch up with him. Yet, he was no longer afraid to face those moments. He had learned to embrace the uncertainty. Anna had been his constant support, guiding him through his healing process, and now, as he ventured into this new chapter, she was still there. She had become more than just his nurse. She was his partner, his confidant, and someone who truly understood him in ways no one else did. The days had begun to blend together, but in the best way possible. They had developed a new rhythm, a life that was theirs to share, free from the ghosts of the past. Anna had been patient with him, letting him take the lead when it came to his recovery. She didn't push him, didn't try to control him. She simply walked beside him, offering her support when he needed it, and giving him the space to grow. Now, their relationship was evolving again, but in a way that felt natural. They had spent so much time focused on the external, on what was wrong, what needed to be fixed. But now, they were shifting their focus to what could be built, what they could create together. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of Grant's apartment, overlooking the city lights, he turned to Anna with a thoughtful expression. "Anna," he began, his voice quieter than usual, "I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next for us." She turned toward him, her eyes soft and filled with curiosity. "What do you mean?" she asked gently. "I mean, we've come so far. I've come so far. And it feels like we're on the edge of something new, something real. But I can't help but wonder, what's next for us? For me." His words were full of uncertainty, but there was a sense of hope in his voice that she hadn't heard before. Anna took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I think we're already building something, Grant. We don't need all the answers right now. We just need to keep moving forward, together. And when the time comes, we'll know what's next." Grant looked at her, his gaze searching her face. "You really believe that?" he asked softly. She smiled, nodding. "I do. You've already started something incredible. You've changed so much already. And no matter what happens, we'll face it together." The quiet between them felt comfortable, a silence full of understanding. There was no rush, no pressure. They had both found their way, and now they could walk down this new path side by side. But even as they embraced the moment, there was still the matter of Grant's family, particularly Nathan. He had stopped pressuring Grant about the company, but the tension between them was far from resolved. Nathan hadn't truly accepted Grant's decision to step away from the business, and it was clear he didn't understand why his brother had chosen this new path. Grant had hoped that time would ease things, but he knew better. Nathan's rigid worldview couldn't be easily shaken. And yet, Grant couldn't change his decision. He had found something more meaningful, more fulfilling than the business could ever provide. One day, after a quiet morning with Anna, Grant received a call. It was from Nathan. His heart sank slightly as he answered. "Grant." Nathan's voice came through the phone, tense and clipped. "We need to talk." Grant let out a slow breath. He had been dreading this moment. "What's on your mind?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. "I've been thinking about what you said," Nathan began, his voice holding a note of frustration. "And I still don't get it. You're throwing away everything we worked for, everything we built. You think you can just walk away from it all and find happiness in some new life?" Grant's grip on the phone tightened. He had expected this, but hearing Nathan's words still stung. "It's not about throwing anything away, Nathan. It's about choosing something that's more important to me. Something that makes me happy, something that I can build for myself." Nathan's silence on the other end of the line stretched on. Finally, he spoke, his voice more subdued. "I still think you're making a mistake, but I guess I have to accept it. You're not the person I thought you were. I don't know who you are anymore." Grant felt the weight of his brother's words, but this time, they didn't have the same power over him. "Maybe that's the point, Nathan," he said calmly. "I'm finding out who I am. And for the first time, I'm okay with not having all the answers. I'm not the person I was before, and I'm not trying to be. I'm just me." The line was quiet for a moment. Nathan finally spoke again, this time with a hint of resignation. "I can't change your mind. I don't get it, but I'll leave you to it. I just hope you don't regret this." Grant's chest tightened, but he stood firm. "I won't regret it. This is my choice, Nathan, and I'm not looking back." As the call ended, Grant sat there for a moment, the silence of the room settling around him. Anna, who had been quietly watching, came over and sat beside him. She reached out and took his hand in hers, her touch warm and reassuring. "You did the right thing," she said softly. Grant nodded, his voice low but filled with certainty. "I think I finally know what it means to be free. I'm not going back. Not for anyone." Anna smiled, her heart swelling with pride for him. "You've already come so far, Grant, and I know you'll keep moving forward. Together, we can face whatever comes next." And as they sat there, hand in hand, Grant realized that this was only the beginning. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready for whatever came next. With Anna by his side, he was ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be theirs to walk, together. Grant had finally started to embrace the life he had been afraid to face for so long. The pressure of living up to his family's expectations had haunted him for years, but with each passing day, he was more certain that he had made the right decision. He wasn't the man he used to be, and that realization was liberating. His life had become a journey of rediscovery, one that he had never imagined. His relationship with Anna had grown stronger, more profound. She had been by his side through everything, his struggles, his triumphs, and his moments of doubt. But now, as he looked at her, he realized that she had become more than just his partner in recovery. She had become his foundation, the person who helped him see the world through a different lens. They had spent so much time focusing on the past, on the things that had shaped their lives and the struggles they had endured. But now, they were looking forward. They were beginning to dream about the future in a way that felt real, not just a vague hope. One evening, as they sat together in the cozy living room of Grant's apartment, the soft light of the lamps casting shadows on the walls, Grant turned to Anna, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You've changed my life, Anna," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "I don't think I would have gotten this far without you. I don't think I would have had the strength to walk away from everything if you hadn't believed in me." Anna smiled, her heart swelling with affection. "You had the strength inside you all along, Grant. I just helped you see it. I believed in you because I knew you could do this. I knew you could find your way." There was a long moment of silence between them, the weight of their shared experiences hanging in the air. Grant took her hand in his grip gentle but firm. "I've spent so much time living for other people," he said quietly. "For my family, for the business, for all the expectations that were placed on me. But now, I'm finally living for me. And it feels right." Anna squeezed his hand, her smile tender. "It does, doesn't it? It's like we're both finally free. Free to live for ourselves and to build something that's truly ours." Grant nodded, his gaze softening. "We've both been through so much, Anna. But it's made us stronger. We're not the same people we were when we first met. We've grown and we've learned. And now, we can face whatever comes next, together." The idea of the future, of what lay ahead, didn't feel as daunting as it once had. For the first time, Grant felt ready to face it. He had made peace with his past, and was now eager to build the future he had always wanted, one that was no longer defined by his old life. As they sat together, imagining what that future might look like, the world outside seemed to stand still. They didn't need all the answers right away. They didn't need to know exactly where their journey would take them. They just knew that, whatever came, they would face it together. Over the next few months, Grant continued to adjust to his new life. He took things one step at a time, allowing himself to explore new opportunities and experiences. He had always been a man of action, but now, he was learning to savor the moments. He and Anna traveled to places they had always wanted to visit, trying new things, experiencing the world without the constraints of their pasts. They spent more time with each other, building a deeper connection than ever before. Grant had started a small business on his own, something that felt true to him, a venture that was focused on helping others and making a difference in a way that was meaningful to him. It wasn't the massive corporation he had once led, but it was his, and that was enough. He had finally found something that aligned with his values, and he was determined to see it grow. Anna had continued to support him, just as she had from the beginning. She had always been there for him, but now, their relationship was one of equality, of two people walking beside each other rather than one leading the other. It felt right, and it felt like they were both finally in a place where they could thrive. Still, the shadow of his family, particularly Nathan, continued to linger. Nathan had tried to reach out a few times, each attempt more strained than the last. It was clear that Nathan wasn't ready to let go of the past, but Grant had long since made his decision. He wasn't going back to the life he had left behind. He couldn't. It wasn't who he was anymore. One afternoon, as Grant was walking through the park with Anna, he received a call from Nathan. He hesitated before answering, but Anna squeezed his hand, offering silent support. "Hello," Grant answered. Nathan's voice came through, sharp and filled with frustration. "Grant, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I still don't get it. You've walked away from everything we built. You've let go of the company, and now you're just living like this, with no plan. I don't know what you're doing, but it's not the right choice. Grant sighed, feeling the familiar weight of his brother's judgment. But this time, it didn't faze him. I made my choice, Nathan, he said calmly. And it's the right choice for me. You don't have to understand it, but I'm not going back to the way things were. There was silence on the other end, and then Nathan spoke again, quieter this time. I just don't want you to regret it. You've lost so much, and I'm worried you're making a mistake. Grant's chest tightened, but he stayed firm. I'm not regretting anything, Nathan. I'm finally living the life I want. And I don't need your approval to do that. Nathan didn't respond, and after a long pause, Grant ended the call. He felt a sense of finality, but also relief. He had made peace with his decision, and no matter what, he was moving forward. As he turned to Anna, she gave him a gentle smile. You did the right thing, Grant, she said softly. He nodded, a sense of peace settling over him. I did. And now, we can focus on our future. Together, they continued their walk, the world around them vibrant with possibilities. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time, Grant didn't need it to be. He had everything he needed, his freedom, his peace, and Anna by his side. That was more than enough. Grant's life had taken unexpected turns, and he had come to accept that the road ahead would never be perfectly straight. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was in control, not just of his actions, but of his future. The chaos of his past seemed distant now, and with Anna by his side, he was ready to take on whatever came next. They had both transformed, shedding the weight of expectations and fears that had once defined them. They were carving out a life together, built on understanding, trust, and a mutual desire to live authentically. Despite the lingering tension with Nathan, Grant had made peace with his decision. His choice to step away from the family business had cost him more than just a relationship with his brother. It had cost him the life he had known. But it had also opened doors to a future he had never imagined, one that felt more fulfilling than anything he had once strived for. Anna had been a constant presence throughout his journey, always encouraging him to embrace his true self and not be swayed by the pressures that had always surrounded him. Her support had been his anchor, and with her, he had started to see the beauty in living without the need for external validation. As the days passed, Grant's sense of self grew stronger. He was no longer the man who had defined himself by the company he had built, the wealth he had accumulated, or the expectations that had been placed on him. He was Grant, just Grant, and that felt enough. One quiet evening, as they sat in the park near Grant's apartment, the air crisp with the approaching fall, Grant turned to Anna, his eyes reflecting the calm that had settled within him. You know, I never thought I'd be this content, he said softly. There was always this need for more success, more recognition, more everything. But now it's different. I realize that everything I've been searching for, I already have. Anna smiled, her hand finding his. It's about being present, isn't it? About appreciating what we have in the moment instead of always chasing what's next. Grant nodded, his gaze distant for a moment. I used to think that success was a destination, something to achieve and then stop. But now I realize it's about the journey. It's about the small things, the moments we share, the things we build together. Anna squeezed his hand. I'm so proud of you, Grant, for everything you've accomplished, not just in business, but in life. Grant looked at her, his expression softening. I wouldn't have gotten here without you, Anna. You've taught me what it means to live for the right reasons. As they walked back to the apartment, the weight of their shared journey seemed to lift. They had been through so much together, uncertainty, loss, fear, but through it all, they had never wavered in their support for each other. Their relationship had deepened in ways neither of them had expected, and now, it felt like they were embarking on a new phase of their lives. One evening, as they sat in the living room, talking about the future, Grant brought up something he had been thinking about for a while. Anna, there's something I've been wanting to do for a while, he said, his voice filled with quiet excitement. I've always wanted to help people, to make a difference in a way that's meaningful. I don't know exactly how, but I know it's something I want to pursue. Anna listened intently, her heart swelling with pride. I think that's a wonderful idea, Grant. You've always had a heart for people, and now you have the freedom to make that difference. Whatever you choose to do, I know you'll succeed. Grant smiled, his confidence growing. It's not about success in the way I once thought. It's about creating something that matters, something that helps others. Anna nodded. And I'll be right there with you, every step of the way. The thought of the future, of the things they could accomplish together, filled Grant with a sense of purpose he had never known. There were still questions to be answered, challenges to face, but he wasn't afraid of them anymore. With Anna by his side, he knew they could tackle anything. The next few months were filled with new experiences, new challenges, and a growing sense of fulfillment. Grant began to take steps toward creating his own philanthropic foundation, one focused on helping people rebuild their lives in the same way he had. His focus had shifted from personal success to making a real, tangible impact on the world. He and Anna spent countless hours brainstorming ideas, meeting with others who shared their vision, and building something that felt like it was truly theirs. There were setbacks, of course, and moments of doubt, but they faced them together. Each challenge strengthened their resolve and deepened their connection. And as their foundation began to take shape, so did their relationship. They had started as two individuals, both lost in their own ways, both searching for something they couldn't quite define. But now, they were partners in every sense of the word, building a future together, side by side. One evening, as they sat in the office of their new foundation, reviewing plans for their next project, Grant turned to Anna with a smile. "Can you believe we're doing this?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. Anna grinned, her eyes sparkling. "I can believe it, because we've come this far together. And I know this is just the beginning." Grant's heart swelled with gratitude. He had found his purpose, his direction, and the love of his life. The future no longer felt like an intimidating unknown. It felt like an exciting adventure, one that he was ready to embark on with Anna by his side. And for the first time in a long time, he was confident that whatever came next, he could face it. Together, Grant stood at the window of his office, looking out over the city skyline. It had been months since he had made the decision to leave his old life behind, but it still felt like a dream. He had built something new, something real, and every day was a new opportunity to live on his own terms. The foundation was thriving, and with Anna by his side, they were making a difference in ways he had never imagined possible. But even as he embraced this new chapter, there were moments when the weight of his past would creep back in, uninvited. The business world he had once been a part of, the family expectations that had shaped so much of his life, still lingered in the background. It was easy to get lost in the glow of new achievements, to forget the sacrifices that had led him here. But those moments of doubt didn't last long. He had learned to let go of the old expectations and focus on the present. He was living for himself now, and that truth felt more solid with each passing day. Anna walked into the office, her presence a welcome comfort. She had always been the steady anchor in his life, the one person who never wavered, no matter the storm. She had been with him every step of the way, through his recovery, his journey to rediscover himself, and the creation of their shared future. She was no longer just his nurse or partner in business. She had become his equal in every sense of the word. "How's the planning going?" Anna asked, her voice warm and calm as she approached him. "It's coming together," Grant said, turning to face her with a smile. "I can't believe how far we've come." "You've come a long way," Anna said softly, her eyes filled with admiration. "From where you were before to where you are now. I'm so proud of you." Grant took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words settle in. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said, his voice full of gratitude. "You've been my strength. Anna, you helped me see what really matters." Anna smiled and reached for his hand. "You always had the strength in you, Grant. You just needed to believe in yourself." As they stood there, their hands intertwined, the future didn't seem so daunting anymore. There would always be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, Grant felt like he was ready for whatever came next. The foundation they had created together was just the beginning. The work they were doing was meaningful, and he could feel the impact it was making in ways that went far beyond any corporate achievement he had once pursued. It was a sense of purpose he had never known before, and it was more fulfilling than anything he had ever experienced. They had built something together, something that mattered. The phone rang, breaking the quiet moment they were sharing. Grant glanced at it, his heart rate quickening as he saw who was calling. It was Nathan. It had been months since their last conversation, and while Grant had hoped the distance between them would lead to a resolution, He knew that his brother still struggled with his decision to leave the family business. Grant hesitated for a moment, his hand still holding Anna's. "I need to take this," he said softly. Anna nodded, squeezing his hand gently before stepping back. Grant answered the phone, taking a deep breath. "Nathan," he said, his voice calm. "What's going on?" There was a long pause on the other end before Nathan's voice came through, tight with frustration. "Grant, I've been thinking a lot about what you said about your decision to walk away, and I still don't understand it. I'm not going to lie, I'm angry, and I don't agree with it. But I think I'm starting to see things differently." Grant leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Nathan sighed on the other end. "I've been so caught up in trying to fix things, trying to make you see that the company needed you. But the truth is, I think I've been holding on to something that isn't real anymore. I've been holding on to the idea of what we used to be, of what I thought we should be. But it's not the same. You're not the same person, and maybe that's okay." Grant's chest tightened, the weight of his brother's words hitting him harder than he expected. There was a long silence as Grant processed what Nathan had said. Finally, Grant spoke, his voice softer than before. "I'm sorry, Nathan. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know this hasn't been easy, but I had to make a choice. And I had to choose what was best for me." Nathan's voice broke the silence again, but this time, it was gentler. "I know. I've been holding on to a lot of things, too. I think we both have. Maybe it's time for us to let go and move forward." There was another pause, and then Nathan added, "I don't know what the future holds, Grant. But I want you to know that I'm not angry anymore. I may not fully understand, but I respect your decision." Grant exhaled slowly, the tension in his chest loosening. "Thank you, Nathan," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That means more than you know." The conversation ended on a quiet note, the weight of years of unresolved tension slowly lifting. Grant sat back in his chair, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. He didn't know what the future held for him and Nathan, but he knew this conversation had been a step toward healing, toward understanding. Anna re-entered the room, her eyes immediately finding his. "How did it go?" she asked softly. Grant smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in months. "It went better than I expected," he said. "I think we're both finally starting to move on." Anna walked over to him, her hand finding his again. "I'm glad," she said, her voice full of warmth. "And now, we can continue building the future we've started." Grant nodded, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "Together," he said, his voice filled with certainty. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Grant knew he was ready for whatever came next. With Anna by his side, he had everything he needed to face the future, and more. Grant leaned back in his chair, his eyes closed, savoring the quiet after the call with Nathan. For the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. The weight of the past was no longer pressing on his shoulders, and he was beginning to feel like he could truly move forward. It had been a long, difficult journey, but he had come to understand something fundamental. His happiness wasn't tied to the past, the company, or the expectations of others. It was about creating a life that was his to define, and that was what he was doing now. Anna was there with him, every step of the way, and that made all the difference. They had both grown together, learning from their struggles and building a future that felt more authentic than anything Grant had known before. She had become his partner, not just in the business they had built, but in life. The connection they shared was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was genuine, built on trust, respect, and a shared vision of what their future could be. As they continued to work on the foundation, they started to expand their focus, reaching out to more communities, partnering with organizations, and making a tangible impact. Grant had always known that he wanted to help people, but now, with Anna's support, he was seeing the full scope of what they could achieve together. It wasn't just about charity, it was about empowerment. It was about creating lasting change and giving people the tools they needed to transform their own lives. They had already seen the difference they were making, and it filled them both with a sense of pride. One evening, as they sat together, reviewing their progress, Anna turned to Grant with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said, her voice soft, "we've come so far. But sometimes, I can't help but think about how much more we can do. There's so much out there, so many people who need help. I don't think we'll ever be done, but I think we're on the right path." Grant looked at her, his heart swelling with admiration. "I agree. It feels like we've only just started, but we've already made a real difference. And the best part is, we're doing it together. Anna smiled, her eyes sparkling. I couldn't have asked for a better partner. Grant's gaze softened as he reached out and took her hand. The feeling is mutual. You've made all of this possible. You've shown me what it really means to live, to give back, and to love. There was a silence between them, but it wasn't an uncomfortable one. It was the kind of silence that came when two people had shared so much and were completely in tune with each other. They had come a long way from the early days of uncertainty and doubt. What had started as Grant's journey of recovery had become a shared adventure, one that was continually evolving. They both knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but they also knew that they were more than capable of facing whatever challenges lay ahead. As the weeks passed, Grant and Anna continued to build on what they had started. The foundation they had created had grown, attracting attention from donors, volunteers, and communities who were eager to get involved. They had built a strong network of like-minded individuals who shared their vision and were passionate about the work they were doing. And while Grant was no longer the CEO of a corporate empire, he had found something far more meaningful, his sense of purpose. He was using his resources, his influence, and his time to create a positive impact, and that was worth more than any business deal or financial success he had once chased. As they sat together in the evening, discussing their future plans, Grant could sense the shift in the air. It wasn't just the momentum of their work that felt different. It was the sense of fulfillment that had settled over them both. For the first time in years, Grant felt a deep sense of contentment. He wasn't looking for anything else. He had everything he needed right here: his work, his purpose, and Anna. Their relationship had blossomed into something beautiful, something that neither of them had anticipated. They had started out as two people from completely different worlds, both lost in their own ways. But now, they were building something that was uniquely theirs, something that wasn't defined by their past, but by the present and the future they were creating together. The thought of the future no longer felt overwhelming. It felt like an exciting adventure, one that they would embark on together, hand in hand. Whatever challenges came their way, they knew they would face them as a team. And with that thought, Grant felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had finally found the life he had always been searching for. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. And for the first time, in a long time, he felt at home in his own skin. As they stood together, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Grant turned to Anna with a smile. "You know," he said softly, "I never imagined that life could be like this. I never imagined that I could find happiness in something so simple, so real." Anna smiled back, her eyes full of warmth. "It's not about the big things, Grant. It's about the small moments, the connections we make, and the difference we can make in the world. And we're doing that. We're living it." Grant nodded, his heart full. "Together," he said, his voice full of conviction. "We're doing it together." And as they stood there, the future ahead of them, they knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. Their journey had only just begun, but with each other, they were ready for whatever came their way. The journey Grant had embarked on, alongside Anna, was becoming more fulfilling with each passing day. Their work at the foundation had grown steadily, touching more lives and making a real difference in the communities they reached. There were days when the weight of responsibility felt heavy, but the purpose behind their mission kept them going. What had once started as a personal journey of healing for Grant had blossomed into something far greater. Together, they had created something that was not just changing lives, but also redefining their own. For Grant, the business world he had left behind now seemed so far away. In its place, he had found a new world, a world of giving, of helping, and of forging meaningful connections. But beyond the work, the most significant change had been in himself. He was no longer driven by the relentless need to prove himself, to chase after success. The constant pressure to outdo himself, to stay ahead of the competition, had been replaced by a calm sense of fulfillment. He was no longer a man defined by wealth or position. He was a man defined by the work he did and the people he helped. As they sat together one evening, reviewing the foundation's latest projects, Anna noticed the change in Grant. There was a peace about him now, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. He wasn't seeking validation from anyone, not even from himself. He had found contentment, and that was enough. "You know," Anna said, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking about how far we've come. I remember when we first started, and it felt like we were just taking one step after another, not knowing where we were headed. But now it feels like we're building something that's truly lasting. Grant turned to her, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. I don't think I could have done it without you, he said softly. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You helped me see what really matters, and for that, I'll always be grateful. Anna's eyes softened as she reached out to take his hand. We've done this together, Grant. You were always capable of more than you realized. I just helped you see it. There was a brief pause as they sat in companionable silence, reflecting on the life they were building. The foundation was growing, and so was their relationship. It was no longer just about work. It was about the life they had created together, a life that was full of purpose, filled with love, and built on mutual respect. But even as they celebrated their achievements, there were still moments of uncertainty. As the foundation expanded and more people became involved, they faced new challenges. The more their efforts were recognized, the greater the responsibility became. Sometimes, the weight of it all felt overwhelming. But Grant knew that they could face whatever came next, as long as they were in it together. One evening, as they sat at dinner, discussing their next steps, Anna brought up a topic that had been on her mind for a while. Grant, I've been thinking, she said, her tone serious. We've come so far, and we've made such an impact. But what if we could do more? What if we could expand beyond what we've already done, reach even more people? Grant looked at her, intrigued by the possibility. What do you mean? He asked. Anna paused for a moment before continuing. I mean, we're already helping so many communities, but what if we could scale our efforts even further? What if we could start programs that not only provide immediate help, but also empower people to create change in their own lives, long-term? Grant leaned back in his chair, considering her words. The idea was both exciting and daunting. The work they had done so far had been meaningful, but expanding their reach would require more resources, more planning, and more people involved. It wasn't a decision to take lightly. It's a big step, Grant said slowly, but I see what you're saying. We've been able to make a real difference on a smaller scale. But if we truly want to leave a lasting impact, we may need to take things further. Anna smiled, her eyes shining with determination. Exactly. We've seen what's possible when we come together, when we work toward a shared vision. Now, it's time to think bigger. If we can make a difference in the lives of individuals, imagine what we could do if we could reach entire communities, entire regions. The idea was overwhelming but filled with potential. Grant knew that taking this next step would be a challenge, but it was a challenge he was willing to face. Together, they had already built something meaningful. Now, it was time to see how far they could take it. Over the next few weeks, they worked tirelessly, planning their next phase. They met with partners, sought funding, and connected with people who shared their vision. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, difficult conversations, and moments of doubt. But they never wavered. They knew that the work they were doing was important, and that kept them focused on the end goal. As the months went by, their vision began to take shape. The foundation grew, and with it, the number of lives they touched. It wasn't just about providing immediate assistance anymore. They were creating sustainable programs that would empower individuals and communities to build a better future for themselves. It was a long-term investment in people's lives, and that was the legacy they wanted to leave behind. One day, as Grant and Anna stood at a community center they had helped establish, looking out at the people they had worked with, Grant couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. This was what he had been searching for all along, a way to make a real difference, not just for himself, but for others. He had finally found the life he had always wanted, one that was defined not by success or wealth, but by the impact he had on the world. We've come a long way, Grant said, his voice full of emotion. Anna stood beside him, her hand finding his once again. And we've only just begun, she replied with a smile. Together, they knew that the future was full of possibilities. They had built something beautiful, something that would continue to grow, and no matter where their journey took them, they would face it together. As Grant stood alongside Anna, overlooking the community they had helped transform, there was a deep sense of fulfillment that settled within him. What had started as a personal journey of recovery had grown into a movement, a foundation that not only changed lives, but also gave him a purpose that he had never fully understood until now. The work they had done together had left an indelible mark on so many. and as Grant gazed at the faces of the people they had helped, he realized that this was the true legacy he had always been searching for. The feeling was one of deep gratitude, not just for the work they had accomplished, but for the people who had been part of their journey, for the lessons learned, and for the love and support that had been a constant thread through it all. It was amazing how far they had come, how much had changed in just a few short years. The ambitious man who had once been driven solely by success and wealth had been replaced by someone who now valued relationships, impact, and authenticity above all else. And none of this would have been possible without Anna. She had been his guiding light, his unwavering partner in every sense of the word. Through the challenges, the uncertainty, the setbacks, she had always believed in him, always reminded him that it was not about perfection but progress. Together, they had created something beautiful, a life, a foundation, and a future that was theirs to shape. As they sat together that evening, enjoying the peace that came with knowing they had made a real difference, Anna turned to Grant with a soft smile. "We've done more than I ever dreamed we could," she said quietly, her voice full of emotion. "It's hard to believe this all started with just a simple idea, a shared dream. But here we are, and we've built something lasting." Grant smiled back, the weight of everything they had done washing over him in a wave of gratitude. "I never could have done it without you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me the courage to face my fears, to step away from the past, and build something real. You helped me see what truly matters, and for that, I'll always be thankful." Anna's eyes glistened as she squeezed his hand. "We did it together, Grant, and we're still doing it. We've built something strong, but we're not done yet. There's still so much we can do, so many more people we can help." Grant nodded, feeling the same sense of purpose that had carried them through so much. "We've only just begun," he said. "There's always more to do, but as long as we're together, we'll keep going." The next few months were filled with growth and expansion. The Foundation's work had spread far beyond their initial reach, touching more communities and providing resources to people who needed it most. With the support of donors, volunteers, and local organizations, Grant and Anna's vision had become a reality, and they saw firsthand how their efforts were helping people transform their lives. The Foundation wasn't just about giving, though that was a vital part of it. It was about empowering individuals to take charge of their own futures. They had created programs that provided education, job training, and mentorship, giving people the tools they needed to build better lives for themselves and their families. Grant had never imagined that his life would take this turn. He had once believed that success was defined by the size of his empire, the amount of money he made, the title he held. But now, he understood that true success was about the difference you made in the world, the lives you touched, and the relationships you built. And with Anna by his side, he had everything he needed to face the future. They had become a team, not just in their work, but in their lives. Together, they had built a future that was no longer defined by external pressures or expectations, but by the things that truly mattered: love, purpose, and a shared vision. One evening, as they sat at their favorite restaurant, enjoying a quiet dinner together, Anna looked across the table at Grant with a thoughtful expression. "What's next for us, Grant?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity. Grant smiled, taking a sip of his wine. "Next," he repeated softly, "we keep going. We keep growing. There's still so much to be done, and I want to keep pushing forward. But more than that, I want to keep building this life with you." Anna's eyes softened, and a gentle smile tugged at her lips. "You're right," she said. "We've come so far, but there's always more we can do. And I can't think of anyone I'd rather do it with than you." Grant reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "We've already built something beautiful together. And whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Because this, what we have, what we're doing, this is just the beginning." As they sat there, in the soft glow of the restaurant's lighting, surrounded by the hum of conversations and clinking glasses, they both knew that their journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. The foundation they had built was thriving, their lives were filled with purpose, and their love for each other had grown deeper than either of them could have ever imagined. Together, they had created something that would last, a life full of meaning, change, and the kind of fulfillment they had always searched for. They were no longer defined by the past or by what they had left behind. They had created a future that was entirely their own. And with each new step they took, they knew they would continue to shape it, together, In this captivating journey, we dive into one of the most inspiring millionaire stories of transformation, where a man, once defined by his empire and wealth, learns the true meaning of happiness and purpose. Grant, a successful businessman, finds himself at a crossroads when he realizes that the pursuit of more and more success leaves him empty. As his story unfolds, we see the power of self-discovery, the importance of love and connection, and the strength to walk away from a life built on external validation. With the unwavering support of Anna, a woman who helps him find his true path, Grant embarks on a journey that will change not only his life, but the lives of many others. This millionaire story isn't just about financial success. It's about finding meaning and fulfillment in the simple things that truly matter. Through their foundation, Grant and Anna make a tangible difference in the lives of individuals and communities, proving that success is not just measured in dollars, but in the impact we have on the world. As their journey progresses, they face challenges, but together, they continue to build something beautiful, creating a future that's grounded in love, purpose, and meaningful change. This is one of the most compelling millionaire stories you'll ever hear, a reminder that real success comes from within, and the true reward lies in the difference we make for others. With each step forward, Grant and Anna show us that millionaire stories are not just about money, but about the legacy we leave behind. Their story proves that with the right people by our side, there are no limits to what we can achieve. Discover this transformative tale of self-realization and how Grant and Anna's shared vision leads to a future full of hope, purpose, and lasting change. Their millionaire story is not just a journey of success. It's the story of love, growth, and making a real difference in the world.